Episode 4. We're in the works here. We're just laughing about every time we step back up, we were missing something or need something else. Why did you never need a headset before?
No, I had one. I just forgot mine.
Okay. I thought we were totally missing from
What a total Mickey Mouse crew you got going on here. This is a circus.
Yeah, but the funny part is you were actually brought on this to handle all the communication and all the necessities.
Yeah.
And
so
look where we are. Well, it is, yeah, because you should have thought of all this
stuff. The producer's supposed to bring their own headphones.
Well, we're supposed to provide it.
What a train wreck you are over there.
We are supposed to provide it. So here we are, episode 4. It's been amazing so far. We've had great feedback. We are on several platforms now.
On everything. Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, pretty much.
All right, so the best compliment I've gotten from 2 people, actually today alone, is this isn't always about bodybuilding.
It's not. You know, I've had people say that to me. They're like, why don't you talk more about bodybuilding with Jay? And it's like, you've been talking about bodybuilding on podcasts and DVDs for 20 years. People know that side of you. You know, you can talk about doing bench press how many times. People get tired of that. People want to know the real Jay, the Jay that's not in the gym, the Jay that laughs and is a smart ass at times, and just they want to know the real you.
Yeah, listen, I went to California this weekend. You were in Texas, and we'll talk a little bit about your trip rather than mine, but people don't know what I went there for. So, you know, we decided last minute. It was kind of funny. I decide, you know, I'm last minute with everything. Even when you remember, you know, when we go on these trips, you'll be like, what time do you want to train? I'm like, I don't know. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, let's go to the gym
now.
Or even now I text you and I'm like, this morning I text you, I said, hey, I'm going to be at Fit Club. I'm leaving to go to the gym. And
you know how many times you'll say to me, I'm like, what time you train? I'm not training today.
Yeah.
And 2 hours later, I'm on my way to that dump. I'm going to go train. Like, yo, you told me you weren't training.
So I decided on Thursday, it was Thursday evening.
Yeah.
I said to Angie, I said, pack a bag, let's go to California. And we went and stayed in Huntington at the Paseo Hotel, which is awesome. I've told you about this many times. And, you know, we drove it we left Vegas around 9:30. Waze told me it was about 4 hours, which I was kind of surprised because I figured that late. You know, I used to live in Orange County, so it would take me about 3.5. I remember when I was building my house, I was driving back and forth to pick out like my cabinets and my flooring when I was building my first home. And I used to go in my Corvette, which was my dream, by the way, to drive across the desert in a Corvette. And I thought, okay, this shouldn't take that long. But what I was kind of surprised when it was a full 4 hours. It was actually 4 hours and 7 minutes. And you know, we got out there about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was kind of nice to get settled, although Friday I was on the phone and computer most of the day. I did get to train at a place called Earned. It was like a key card club, and I got to run into a few people. I did get to film a jaywalking, but I more importantly got to eat out. I got to relax. I had dinner with my friend Bear on Friday evening. And a couple friends came down from Santa Monica, and it was just nice to relax and get away from the heavy heat for some time. And, you know, sometimes you need that little reset. I remember you texted me or called me, and you were like, you know, what's going on? And I said, I'm in California. I think you were kind of surprised. And I love going near the beach and just getting the ocean breeze. And we rode bikes one day. We put the dogs in the baskets, and we were able to cruise up and down by the pier in Huntington Beach. And you know, we didn't sit by the pool or anything like that, but we just got to get out of our normal routine here in Vegas and take my head out of work for a minute. And that was kind of more of a reset. And I'm very fortunate to have those weekends right now that I haven't had in the past 20 years because, you know, it's back to back to back, especially during this season. And
usually from summer, it's nonstop till December.
Yeah, and I can reminisce a lot because this would be the time when I would be prepping for the Olympia, because the Olympia during my era was most of the time September and October. So I was very limited on what I could really do because I would shut it down in June and then I would compete in September and October. And then, I would start picking guest appearances back up again. But since, the whole expo slowed down and everything else, it's been a little more restrictive on the travel schedule. And I tell you all the time, like, I just don't want to travel as much. But, we took the dogs with us. It was great. And, we ended up, you remember you called me on Monday, like, when you going back? And I wasn't sure yet. We ended up coming back late Monday. I thought we were going to do this podcast actually Tuesday night, but here we are getting it done. And you had a pretty eventful weekend going to the show. And
yeah, I went to Dallas for the Texas Pro. And, if people don't know, I manage Angelica Teixeira, the two-time Miss Bikini Olympia, four-time Arnold Classic champion. And this was her first show that she's promoting as a promoter, and with Freddie and Sheila. And it was a really good production. The stage it was this massive LED screen, and the middle part of it sunk back. So when you're looking straight on, it looked like a full stage. So when the competitors came out, they walked right out of the middle of the stage, and you just saw them appear. And it was a really good show. Usually you don't see that type of production quality at a smaller show, outside of the Arnold or the Olympia, but they did a hell of a job. Tyler Mannion was the head judge, and we saw a battle with Iain coming back from Tampa, and Philip Klahar and Steve Kluklo. The three of them had an absolute battle. And I was texting you, the whole time, like, I thought Iain was a clear shot winner, but that wasn't the overall opinion. Everyone had their opinions about it.
Yeah, it looked like a lot. So, the show was in Dallas. I won my pro card in Dallas, 96 Nationals. Because the Nationals used to go, from Dallas to Atlanta.
Yep. And then they started shifting it to Miami.
Yeah, and then Miami. So it would kind of every year it would go in a different location. And I won the pro card in 96 in Dallas. I remember going there. My whole family came, actually. It was the first time that my nieces and nephews, my brothers, they rented a van and they drove from Massachusetts to Texas. My brother was in the service, so he was stationed in Fort Hood. So it's probably the first time he's been back. My brothers don't get on planes. They still do concrete stuff back home. They drive wherever they go. So they brought the whole family down, and I got to train at Coleman's gym. What's it like? What was the setting in Dallas? Did you migrate outside the hotel much, or was it?
Not a whole lot. I got there. I landed actually 15 minutes after Angelica. If people don't know, she's pregnant, and she flew in from Austin,
which is a short flight.
Yeah, short flight because her husband couldn't come over till Friday, so I flew in with her, and we got to the hotel, and everything you needed was right there. Across the street. What kind of hotel
was it?
It was a Westin.
Okay.
Across the street had about 20 restaurants, sushi, Bar Louie, a bunch of different types of food. And then across the street, the opposite way, was this convention, and you walked right through. So everything we needed. So
was it a convention center, or was it
it was a convention center, but you just crossed the street. I don't think it was technically connected, but it was, there were several hotels that were considered convention hotels. So outside of that, I just did basic work. It had a decent hotel gym, so you just get in there, do a little pump, and there was no need for me to really venture out. Sometimes sometimes we go places and, there's no food near, or there's no decent gym in the hotel. So as soon as we're done, we're jumping in an Uber and we're shooting over to this restaurant, or we're going to this gym, or I thought about going up to the Destination Dallas, but it's just a little too far. That's in Dallas. This was in Irving. And, I just didn't feel like driving 35 minutes. I think Guy Cisternino stayed near that, and he told me it was about a 30-minute drive.
Okay. So, people think, Texas is such a big state, right? So, I wonder how far the drive is from Austin to.
So at the end of the show, me, Angelica, and I drove back, and I went and spent a couple days with them.
How far?
About a little over 2 hours. It wasn't a bad drive, and it's Texas, everyone's going 80, 85, 90. So it wasn't a bad drive at all. It's just a straight shot from Dallas right into Austin.
So we're getting into the nitty gritty of the season. We're coming down to the last qualifiers, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure the tension at these shows is getting now, because it's do or die, right? We got that. show, we're talking the U.S. based. So we had that show. We have the Arnold still.
And that's it.
That's it.
That was it.
And I know we talked about the Europe thing. We'll talk about that in a minute.
But the thing with the Arnold is, I don't think you're going to, nobody's going to get points from that. That's going to help them. Whoever wins it is going to get qualified for this year. And the front runners are qualified minus Steve and Sergio, guys that I think could win.
That brings me, I want to talk a little bit about that. So for the people that are kind of new to bodybuilding, just so you understand, like I'm going to talk a little bit about my background where, I qualified for my first Olympia in 99.
Okay.
I turned pro in 96. I skipped 97 because I turned pro at 23. I was up into the pros now against Wheelers and Colemans and Dillettes, Nasser El-Sambadis, and all these people that I didn't feel I could be competitive with. So I skipped 97. In 98, I went into the Night of Champions because it was an East Coast show. There were very limited shows at that point. So it was only like the Night of Champions. They might have had the Canadian Pro. They might have had they had the Ironman, and they had, the Arnold, and that was it. Like, you didn't have a lot of shows. So they had qualification processes. So certain shows top 3, certain shows top 5.
Yeah.
So when I did the Night of Champions that year, top 5 qualified for the Olympia. Well, guess what? Ronnie Coleman won and Kevin Leverone was second. So I finished 11th in that show. I actually tied with Milos Sarcev that year in 98. And then 90, I didn't qualify, so I had to sit out the Olympia. I was very disappointed. I was a Weider athlete at the time, and part of our contract was the whole goal of the year is to qualify for the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
And you had limited time to do that, but we did have placings that allowed us to do that other than just victories, which today that's what you have because there's so many more qualifiers, right?
Yeah.
So I went into 99 and I prepared for the Arnold Classic and the Pro Ironman, which were back-to-back weeks.
Wasn't the Ironman the week? It was always the week before the
Arnold. So I flew to California. I got third there, and I qualified by top 3.
Okay.
But I still had plans the next week to compete at the Arnold Classic. I finished 4th there, top 5 qualified.
So you qualified twice.
Yes. And that led me to going to the Olympia in 99, which I finished second to last, okay? So I had to requalify for the next year. So 2000, I went into the Night of Champions. I won there. And then I qualified for the Olympia. I finished 8th. But guess what? I went on the European tour after, and I placed second to Ronnie Coleman at 2 contests because a lot of guys didn't go. But that top 8 qualified me for the year.
Back then, it was the top 10
yes.
at the Olympia. Qualified for the
because
next year.
There were only like 12 or 13 or 14 guys that qualified.
Yeah.
Okay, the Olympia was the elite, right?
Yeah.
So I was able to sit out 2001. I didn't do any contests until the Olympia. Now, I qualified 3 times, actually, because I did twice on the European tour, 2 shows, and then I qualified by top 10. I was 8th, 2000. And then I landed second. Second. It qualified me. Yeah, it qualified me by the top placings. It was still top 10, and I think eventually it changed to top 5. But I never looked back after I finished second. I was winning Arnold Classics and other contests. So the qualification process has changed. But what I notice now is, number one, the guys are reliant on these contests in order to gather prize money. Okay, which isn't a huge prize. I think it was $10,000 these few shows. Night of Champions actually was about 15 when I won it back in 2000. I think it's less today. I think it's
and you
around
still have that
12,000.
ring too because I see it on the thing.
It's sitting over there.
Yeah.
And so I imagine now, without the contracts, if I was competing, bro, I would be doing every contest I could if I could
be cleaning house.
Yeah. So I know there was some talk. Okay, there was some negative talk about, Iain doing 2 back-to-back contests even though he qualified, and there was people like, well, let someone else qualify. Bullshit.
No, I agree.
Why? You're a professional athlete.
Compete.
You're there to win. So I applaud that. I'm in favor. So,
of course,
I know some people would disagree, but I mean, it's like Ashley.
Yeah,
winning everything.
She told me
right?
I think she's going to do like 12 shows this year.
Okay, but she's won everything. She got second, by the way, this past weekend,
yeah,
and
the first,
which is amazing. We need to mention her. So tell she did 2 back-to-back, first ever done.
She actually, so at that Texas show, outside of
this is the former
bodybuilding,
Miss Olympia.
Yes, she's tied with Dexter right now for the most wins.
Which is what, 29?
Which is 29.
Okay.
She went into the Texas show, and that was on a Friday for bikini.
So you were there?
Yes.
Okay.
I was there. She won that show. That's what tied Dexter.
Okay.
That Sunday, there was a show in Tahoe so she flew out Saturday morning to Tahoe to compete in the second show. And Aaron Stern, who was a former three-time, I think, Miss Figure Olympia, who came back, got her pro card as a bikini competitor, and came in, and she ended up beating Ashley.
Oh, she did. I didn't know who won.
Aaron Stern won.
Okay.
And she's my age, and she came back and won a bikini show. So she's now going to be doing the Miss Olympia in the bikini division.
Wow.
And she's a former Olympia champion. I don't think there's ever been a former Olympia champion who's qualified in another division. Now, Regan Grimes qualified as classic and open. What was I think Logan
Franklin, he was men's physique.
He did men's physique, and he's done it as classic. And then Hadi Chupan qualified as a 212 and an open guy in the same year.
Yeah.
That's when Hani was like, are you going to do open or 212, open or 212? I thought he should have been able to do both. Fuck it. You know? But yeah, so Ashley was like, she competed 2 times in a weekend, and that was, she ended up winning bikini.
Yeah, listen, I applaud that, and I didn't see what the pictures looked like, but for her to go and win and place a second, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, I saw a lot of negativity with Iain. They're like, well, you qualified, why are you doing Texas? He said up front beforehand,
he was
I'm doing Tampa,
yeah.
I'm doing Texas no matter what the outcome is.
And he's going to the Arnold too.
Yep. And look, man, he looked good in Tampa, and he beat absolutely shredded Philip. And then now Philip came into the show in Texas, and he was even more shredded than he was, in my opinion, than he was in Tampa. But Iain was also as conditioned as I've ever seen him. Like when he turned around and had his back shots, like Philip, he's got a silhouette, back double.
Yeah.
But Iain was just absolutely diced from head to toe. And if he has that type of showing at the Arnold, he will be a front runner. He'll be right there toe to toe with whoever else comes in that type of condition.
Yeah, listen, I hate judging shows by pictures. You were sending me kind of the updates as they were going, and you said, Steve was really big. We talked
massive
about it. We expected him to win it because he had of all the guys the most elite status of the guys competing. Right, he finished 6th at the Olympia, I think, his last goal.
He doesn't have a weak point.
No, he's just massive, and I heard his weight was just crazy. But
291, I think he said.
I mean, listen, separation has always been his downfall, right? And it sounded like, based on what happened, he just didn't have enough condition, meaning like he wasn't dry enough. Yeah. Maybe if he had a little better dryness, maybe not condition, he could have won the show. And I heard it was kind of a toying cost, trying to figure out if you're going to go for a bigger, a more, symmetrical guy, or, I know this guy, Philip, has crazy back double, but to me, looking at now 2 shows, and I think actually he competed in 3 because he didn't in Chicago. He got like 11th or something. I think that he's still, from behind his legs, are lacking that roundness.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously the condition's there, but you got to get that fuller appearance, especially when you turn around. The back double may beat some of these guys or all of them, but I still think the downstairs needs to match that crazy back double, right?
You know what it is as well? So Steve was massive, but Iain is so wide, and he's got a small waist that he didn't appear dramatically bigger than Iain. Ian's illusion that he creates
he's
really
got
makes him
more
look
of an
like
X frame, right?
Yes. He looked, he looked like a mass monster. Even though Steve is, he looked very comparable because he's just as wide as him from the shoulders. And if Steve was conditioned like Iain, Steve would have won. Steve could go win the Arnold. Iain could win the Arnold,
Yeah, but they got to deal with Bonnick.
They got to deal with Bonnick. Sergio's going to be in there.
True,
Akeem Williams is going to be in there. These are some tough guys, but look, nobody's ever nails it 100% every time.
Yeah.
You can say how many times did you truly nail in your career.
I was probably off my top more than I was on it.
Of
You know what
course.
I mean, so we got those top three. I don't want to go too in depth with the contest because that's not what I really want to focus on in the podcast. But I do want the viewers do want to know my opinion on things. You know, Hassan, we talked about Martin Fitzwater. Like I know him from my Wyoming show. Like he came out and used to support that event. And I mean, he's a young kid. He finished fourth. Unbelievable potential.
I can say this. If he was conditioned like the other top guys, he would have been right in the mix. And he could have potentially won that show. He's
so
got
huge
a bright
future. I mean, trains his ass off.
Yes.
Small waist.
Yes.
And then who was fifth? Hassan?
Hassan got fifth. It was the best that I've seen Hassan look, you know, from certain shots. Dude, he is just.
I think he's getting bigger.
He's the most muscular human being I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But when he turns around, he just doesn't have that condition. He doesn't have that hardness. And
amazing. How many shows do you think he's done this year?
I think he's done every single one. You know, he didn't do maybe not Tampa.
It's amazing. Like, it's so hard. We get so burnt out when we have to peak for these contests, and this guy's been doing it.
And he's still doing the Arnold. And on points, he's going to qualify for the Olympia.
Do the Olympia, yeah.
You know, now one other show we had this weekend too was also the show in Spain. Mm-hmm. So there's dual shows going where we had Nathan Diasha and Rolly were the two big names going into it. And
do we know who was third in that contest, or was it mostly European
it was
guys?
I'm forgetting.
Oh, the guy Tim from Germany.
I think so, but he looked really good.
He's got really good most musculars, and he's just great. He has got good quads.
And you know, when I was watching the stream wasn't very good. I shouldn't say the lighting wasn't good. The lighting wasn't as good on this side. They had a bunch of lighting in the back, so that affects the lighting coming from the front. But it looks like Nathan nailed it. And it looks like Rolly went from, you know, we even talked about it. Like, I didn't know what he was going to do after that Chicago, and he completely turned around.
Yeah, he transformed.
He transformed the way I didn't think he would. But, you know, he got he got second, so he's qualified for the Olympia. Top two in that show qualified for the Olympia. So now Rolly's going to be doing the Arnold, and Rolly could potentially win the Arnold. He's a front runner as well.
Yeah.
So Rolly's going to do the Arnold, and then he's going to go into the Olympia. And Nathan's going to be doing the Olympia.
Yeah, man, stress. I think when I think of this, I think back to my preparation, Matt, and you know, you witnessed many, but you witnessed the highest level, meaning like you were here for the Olympians, but you weren't there for the trial and error process and being like not the guy people spoke about.
Yeah.
And I remember like when I trained, I mentioned that 99 Arnold and Ironman. I remember like in 98, I was so disappointed that I didn't qualify. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to Chris Aceto at the time, who was training me, I was still living in Massachusetts, and I said, I got to do something different because I just didn't come in shape. And that's when they were testing for diuretics. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know about the, you know, I had used diuretics when I won the nationals, and I didn't know much about it. So, you know, I just didn't take any because I didn't want to fail the test. Well, you know, I knew that this forced me to be in better condition leading up to the contest. So when I prepared in 99, I went on like a 50 carb a day diet, and, you know, being 265, you know, 270 off season and relatively lean. I mean, I was still competing in the, you know, 255, 260 range. I didn't lose a lot because I would put on size. I would tone down because I didn't take any drugs in the off season, you know? So for me, like, I killed myself. I would do 3 days of 50 grams of carbs and like very high protein, like 450 protein. And then on every fourth day, I would bump the carbs way up to like 500, 600 grams, replenish my muscles, and then I'd rip back down again to the high protein. And I was doing 2 hours of cardio a day. I would do an hour of treadmill in the morning at like 4 in the morning. I forced myself to get up. I would train at 7. I'd be in bed every night at like 8 o'clock, and I would do another session an hour before I went to bed and eat a big plate of egg whites. And that's how focused I was to come in my best condition ever. And if you look back at the 99 Ironman, like that was some of the best condition I ever brought. Like I was shredded glutes for the first time and ever, you know. And that's my mindset. So I knew I was willing to outwork anyone. And I feel like a couple of those guys, like I look at Iain like that. Like I feel that he's very dangerous. I think Hunter Labrada is dangerous because these guys are young and hungry. I even feel Sergio has that kind of chip on his shoulder a little bit where they're not there's nothing they won't do in order to be their best.
Yeah.
But they're doing it the right way. And obviously we can talk about like the ins and outs of bodybuilding and what scares people, right? Because, you know, you've seen me kind of on my deathbed, right? Getting ready for competitions.
I actually said that to someone the other day. In 2007, there was a period of me when we were sitting there and I was like, dude, could he die?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I remember just seeing your face and your jaw was shaking as you were talking and you were shaking. And
yeah, I mean, I had a really bad infection. I had a shoulder. I had a like a, I don't know if it was from something I took, like, and I had Silvio come to my house and massage it. And we used like some DMSO or something. And at that point I already had the tan on. So what the DMSO did when he massaged, it kind of went into my skin. And I think it caused the infection to flame up even more. So you can actually see it in the photos. And then I almost lost to, you know, Victor
Martinez, yeah.
And it was just devastating for me. But I can't tell you how many times that I kind of walked that line. And, you know, it became kind of like a topic conversation with Carrie and I, my wife at the time, because she just hated the prep, you know, because I was just always, there was always something where it was either super dehydration or, you know, something that just didn't go right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you have to be perfect on that day. And I was such a perfectionist with my nutrition and the training and the cardio. I never missed, right? If I was always, whatever I was told to do from Chris, the diet, and whatever I was told to, you know, if he told me to eat nails, I would eat nails. Mm-hmm. There was nothing I didn't do. But unfortunately, like, you know, bodybuilding scares people, right? And especially when you hear the topics of, like, we just lost, you know, the Iron Brother, John Meadows, who unbelievably was training so many people. I didn't even realize.
An obscene amount. Like,
you know, Missy Truscott, she won. Shanique Grant.
Yep. He was that. Yep.
Sean Clarita.
I saw his video on YouTube. Yep. I had no idea.
Yes. There was some other people. Cisternino, but there was some other.
Was he training Sergio? Because I saw some videos of Sergio.
Yes. I mean, the list, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm leaving people out, but he left such knowledge to people because of the training theories. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to, you know, 2-3 weeks ago, we shot a video together when I was in Ohio. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, man, I'm getting in on Friday and, you know, we're going to have time to train, because he really wanted to shoot this YouTube video because the one that he had shot prior with me was his best ever.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. It's got millions of views.
It's got 1.2 or 3 million.
Yeah.
He said he opened the latest video and said, you know, you made me the most money of YouTube. And we tried to calculate. I think I asked you, and it was like, you said, well, it's $5,000. I think
$5,000 to $7,000.
So I was kind of like, should I train? And then, you know, of course I got there and I see John's face, and, you know, I got to the gym and I'm like, fuck, he's the best, you know?
Yeah.
And we trained, and we were cut short because we were actually going to do tries and buys. So the video you see, the last video we did together was triceps. We were supposed to do buys and tries together, but his sons, he had to get his sons to do something. He was with his two boys showed up at the gym. Yeah. So just a very, very tough situation. I know it's been touched upon. There's so many videos out there, and you know, but people are very concerned, like when someone passes away at 49 years old, right? And we know he had some complications leading up to that.
Yeah.
And through my whole bodybuilding career, I always had that stigma of, like, how do you look the way you look? Mm-hmm. You know, what do you take? Okay. And it's always like, what do you eat? You know, what do you take? And it's kind of like a roundabout question, is like, you know, they're getting to more of like, okay, what do you take for drugs to look like that? Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, starting off as a teenager, man, like being, you know, kind of like the so-called broke bodybuilder, I was very limited to what was available for me. And I was actually able to grow tremendously on food. I believe that, you know, Chris put a lot of knowledge in my head and taught me that more is not necessary, right? But along the way, you know, even though, you know, bodybuilding has this stigma of, like, you know, it's drug induced, I was very careful to monitor, and do the blood tests. And, I never had high blood pressure. My blood tests were never really out of whack. Of course, you have liver enzymes or,
liver, kidney.
Yeah, kidneys never had an issue.
Hematocrit.
That's, the doctors always told me, the one thing you have to watch is your kidneys because they don't regenerate, right? Yeah. They weren't as
Once
concerned
they're
about
damaged,
liver.
it's forever.
Yeah. So I was always doing blood work at least twice a year. And prior to the Olympia, I'd always do my blood work. And of course, having a ex-wife that was pretty much like a doctor, she became a nurse practitioner. She was very, very careful about that. And you and I have this discussion. What is the biggest obstacle why people don't go for blood work?
I think it's two things. I think one, if they don't have health insurance, they think, how do I go about it? There's times where you hear people say, I got it for $200-300, and there's times where people say, I paid $1,000 for blood work, and it scares people.
I paid $500 out of pocket before,
Yeah, and that's one thing. And the other thing that I really think is, I think a lot of people, they get going in their career and they see this trajectory, and I think they don't even want to know, because if a doctor says, hey man, you got to slow down this, they're like, no, I'm not slowing down. I'm almost to my goal. So they'd rather just not know.
Yes.
And because they don't, and a lot of times that a lot of, especially coaches and trainers will, don't listen to doctors. They know what they're talking about. It's like, actually they do. They may not know enough about what drugs do what, but they know if your body's not healthy or not. Just looking at the blood work, they can tell if you're going in a bad direction. I mean, it's one thing if you get a panel back, and let's say your liver enzymes are high, well, then you get it done a month later. And if your liver enzymes are still high, then obviously there's a problem. But if it's going down, maybe something was going on. Maybe you had a cold or a flu, or you did something wrong where it spiked them up that period. But you have to do consistent blood work to really know.
Yeah, and it's really disappointing because people are turned away from professional bodybuilding. They think that men's physique and classic and it gets a lot less, right? But it doesn't. No. Everyone's genetics are different.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I never had health scares as far as like blood work coming back and them being like, whoa, Jay, you have a big problem here.
Yeah.
So there was never a contest that I couldn't do. And we've heard stories about some of the athletes, like their blood work's not good. So they probably need to back down because you shouldn't have to take that much. If you're taking that much and you're eating that poorly, you shouldn't be in this profession. You know what I'm saying? Or listen, genetics play a huge part on that. I can't tell you that, my dad still being alive at 92, my mom healthy at 80. Some of that has to do with genetics, right?
I actually think genetics played probably the major role, because if you remove drugs from everything, the same, and did the same show, the guys trained the same, you'd still get the same placings. They would just be a little smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I think the condition is harder to get if you're drug free. Although they say this Robert Timms guy that won the Classic over Logan Franklin is drug free.
I don't know. He looked crazy. And
Ronnie Coleman was drug free for even competing in his first Olympia. We can go there and say, like, talk about drug free people, but at the same time, like, you're right. I think you would have certain genetics that allow you to get to a certain level.
Like, for example, if all you guys were competing and Ronnie got like that drug free, could someone compete with him without drugs?
Yeah, it would take a special person, right?
Yeah. So
I believe me, like, mentioning as a teenager, like, listen, man, I was a freak. Like,
of course.
I mean, I was the talk of, I know I came from not a huge area, but like they were calling me from California being like, okay, we hear about this young kid with the big legs. Like, something's up, right? I mean, you just aren't born with that.
No, it's genetics. Because there's other guys that I guarantee you that train legs heavier than you and harder, and they're not half the size.
And that's, that's the most disappointing thing. But, bodybuilding was never, but it always concerned me. When I retired, I was just more thankful of the great, great career that you see on these walls with accolades. But I retired healthy.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I still go, we talk about blood work all the time. I still go get the blood work done. And, of course, I'm not having, anything that's super concerning. But at this point, like, as you get older, you're like, okay, is this going to start being off or whatever else? And, I'm just fortunate. I never really had any issues.
One thing I've noticed too, just talking to some of the guys and the different coaches out there nowadays, and I won't say names or anything, but years ago when you'd hire a coach, they would stress training, diet, and sleep more than anything else. And it seems like nowadays when people hire a coach, one of the first things they want to know is, what type of drugs am I going to do? They want to know that before the other things. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it, because drugs are not going to make you a champion. They can help. But if you don't have your sleep, your diet, and your training on point, they're not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, and we didn't know about, like, there was no such thing as a cheat day or a refeed day or like a high-calorie day. Like, there was no talk. Like, I remember working with Chris, and I had that diet on my refrigerator. It was, like, year-round, like, the same thing.
Eat like a dog.
Yeah,
I
mean, and it was like a moderation.
But you still do that
everything.
To this day, though.
Yeah, man. I mean, I still weigh food, and I'm fortunate. Like I mentioned, Trifecta's been a huge help to me because everything is kind of planned, organic, and I am careful about how much I eat now, like what kind of foods.
I know you stress me because you always say you're eating too much.
A little more, yeah. Me. What do I push you against? I push you against high protein.
I eat like 8 ounces of protein and with meals, and that's probably too much for me because I'm trying to downsize.
I don't care what anyone says. Too high a protein is bad for your body.
Yeah.
And there's so many new things with the fasting, and I mean that's a whole nother discussion. But I just think that food can be very dangerous for the body, especially as we get older. Like, you can't have that mindset of like, okay, I'm 260 and I'm pushing 315 in the gym on the bench and squatting 400, and like those days are over. So the exertion isn't there to maintain that kind of food, right?
Yeah.
So I always stress about that.
Well, at your peak, how many did you count calories ever? Or was
I didn't count calories. I only counted carbs and protein. So I would shoot for about at least 300 grams of protein a day, and I would try for about 600 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. And of course, every meal would be a little different, but I try to stay as low fat as possible. So I only focused on, lean beef, which I got from a butcher early on, chicken, egg whites. I only had 2 whole eggs a day. I never ate more than that. And I never took in extra fats like nuts or almond butter or avocados or anything like that. I always focused on like lower fat, and only the fat came from the 2 whole eggs and the meat that I ate. Mm-hmm. And I ate really lean meat. That was the one thing I missed about Massachusetts was, I told you I used to buy that whole cow, and I would be able to see what was actually ground down instead of walking in a store and purchasing, right? Mm-hmm. And it made a huge difference, the dedication to diet. But if you hire a coach, it should be stressed, the diet, not supplements. Like, listen, I didn't have supplements. I just had a good diet, and, and I trained my ass off. Mm-hmm. So it's super, super important.
Yeah. I think a lot of the coaches now don't stress those things. And I hate saying that. I mean, I'm sure some do, some don't.
Yeah, I just don't believe in
I've noticed it. I think too, I think a lot of the stomachs that are happening, and everyone thinks it's from drugs, but I actually think it's from just overeating and the stomach stretching, because you've seen people have a big stomach and then a year or 2 later it's down.
Yeah, I'd love to know Rolly's way he got his stomach down.
Yeah.
We should ask him.
Yeah. No, because what was it? After he got in that motorcycle accident, he came to Olympia, and I remember his stomach was way out. It looked bad. And then 2 years later, his stomach was just tight and small, and it looked like he never had any issues with that. But that's I'll definitely ask him that and see.
Yeah. So all right. So we have some questions.
One other thing too. We got to mention at the Dallas Pro, it was Guy Cisternino's last show.
Oh yes.
And I figured we're both close to him, and it was good to see that they. Angelica went and sat down with Chickarillo and said, hey, acknowledge him. And the promoters did this thing.
He cried, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, he went up there and he got a standing ovation. It's funny because Guy lives in New Jersey, but he's more of a Texan than he is New Jersey. And if I say that, he'll be like, no, I'm not.
Well, he talked about moving out there at one point,
he fits in there, and he got a standing ovation, and, he got acknowledged for all the hard work he put in. And that was a really good, that was a good send-off, because not everyone gets sent off like that. Sometimes people just leave the stage and never get that opportunity.
Yeah, I texted him. I said, on to the next dream, and he's going to do really well as being a personality. And if he puts all that effort he puts into bodybuilding and focusing on, life and the next ventures, he's going to do amazing.
Yeah, I told him, I said, all right, now that you're retired, now it's time to make money. So,
Well, he texted me that today. Maybe that's why.
I tell him that all the time.
Yeah.
I said, dude, you don't make money from the stage. You make money from your personality. So we got questions, and just so everyone knows, if there's a question you want to ask, just go to the bottom, comment the question, and we'll pick some questions from each podcast, the previous podcast. So it says, who do you think the GOAT of bodybuilding is, and why?
Man, Arnold, of course, is the man, right? Arnold. See, the GOAT to me, like, I look at two different, it depends on what mood I'm in, but the GOAT's Ronnie Coleman as far as, like,
the
physique-wise, and,
yeah.
He's won 8 titles. He tied Lee Haney, and remember, I battled him, so I was more familiar with his career. I started training in 91, so Haney was at the end, but, from my understanding, too, Haney was the man, too, and he was ahead of his time, but the Arnold really transitioned, and that was my ultimate goal. If you asked me when I first started bodybuilding what the whole goal was, I never imagined myself winning the Olympia. So it was more like, hey, I want to make money and be recognized. And I think that I looked at Arnold's business savvy career, and that's what inspired me more to be a bodybuilder and market and become the person that I became. So he had a huge influence on that.
Yeah. I can see what you're saying there. There's kind of, it depends on the angle you go.
Yeah, and he did all he could in bodybuilding, and then he transitioned into other things, and to this day at 74, he's still the man. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
he paved the way and opened a lot of doors for people.
And obviously Coleman, he left his legacy. Unfortunately, it's caused his body a little havoc. But I look at those two guys probably pioneered the position that a lot of us chased, and being on off stage. I always looked at how great can you be all around, and what is going to be your legacy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that Arnold's going to have the greatest legacy in bodybuilding just because he transitioned into so many different he pivoted in so many areas, right, between politics and film, and he was a bodybuilder at the greatest level. So even though, he didn't beat anyone certain years to win those titles, I think one year there was no competition whatsoever. He was just Olympia on his own, which a lot of people don't know. So I look at many different ways, but I would definitely say between those two.
Yeah. No, I some of these guys nowadays, or some of the people that are learning about bodybuilding, and they'll see someone like a big Rami or some of the really big guys. Yeah. And I always tell them, if you didn't see Ronnie, when he was 290 and that grainy, hard and symmetry, I don't care how big someone is on stage. He was just.
I know, dude, but you know what? I'll be honest, and you may think I'm crazy and we're friends or whatever, but I truly thought I was going to beat him every time. Yeah. I literally saw myself. I envisioned myself beating him, and on some occasions, 01, I still feel like, hey, I beat him in a lot of areas. Yes, not the back double and the glutes and stuff, but. It's not all about that. That's two poses to all the side and the front where I had the crazy midsection and all that. I won that contest. And, 2005, I felt it was close enough where I could have won. And, in 06, even though people, I still think I won. It's still, I had matched him pound for pound pretty much. And, that's, when you stand with the greatest, that's what inspires you to be even greater, right?
So think about that. If the greatest of all time, you're the person that dethroned him, where does it put you?
Well, I mean, if Ronnie Coleman wasn't there, where would I have been? But would I have been as motivated to be Jay Cutler?
You might not have trained as hard.
You're right.
But, then that's another thing, too, where people look at Ronnie and go, he won 8 titles, but you were top 2 in the world for, 11 years?
Yeah.
From 01 until... 2011?
Yeah, I lost 11.
But you got second.
Yeah.
So for over a decade, you were top 2 in the world. And if there was no Ronnie Coleman, how many titles did you have?
The expectancy of a pro bodybuilder is 5 years. So there you go.
Next question. You look young for being 48. What's your secret to longevity?
I started Botox early.
How old?
I think 28.
Really? It didn't even seem like a thing then.
I think I did.
Because you're pretty old right now.
Yeah, I did preventative, and I did some, and then I think the the drinking. Like I drink a ton of water. I eat very healthy. You know that. You travel. I mean, I sleep well.
Yeah.
I don't have any
You don't
problem
have
sleeping.
sleep apnea.
Never had sleep apnea. I'm never one that lays down and, oh my gosh, I can't sleep. Like, dude, I hit the pillow and I am done and I need 5 hours. And I usually lately I'm getting 7 or more. Dude, it's like, I'm blessed.
It's funny. We'll get on planes and sometimes you're like, why do you buy a first class ticket? As soon as you get on the plane, you look over, your head's,
dude,
your chin's in your chest and you're out.
It used to be a lot easier for me to fly because my chest was so big.
Just rest your...
And people used to make this joke because they'd sit next to me in the aisle next to me and they'd look over and my chest was literally a shelf. Like my chin would sit on my chest. So it was like the head wasn't even down. So when I woke up, it was like my neck wasn't whacked out, you know? Yeah, listen, sleep, how you eat, and like drinking a lot of water is for sure, and staying out of the sun. Like I cover myself. Like even when we went road bikes in the beach the other week, I wore a long sleeve shirt. You know, I put sunscreen on, and I wear a lot of sunscreen when I go outside. Not to say I always did that.
You gonna put it on your nose like a tourist?
Yeah, no, I spray myself. They have the sprays now, and I do the back of my neck. But listen, genetics too. But at the same time, like a lot of factors. You know, I don't stress either. Like it's not a lot of stress.
So and I don't sleep for shit.
Yeah.
So, any fun or weird moments backstage when you were still chasing Ronnie?
Yeah, listen, I was always like, I couldn't figure out why all the guys were so like like, oh, Ronnie. You know what I mean? Like backstage, like I respected Ronnie, but I was almost like, fuck this guy. Like I'm gonna fucking win this show, you know? And I had that respect factor, but I wasn't like this guy's. I truly thought I was gonna beat him every time. And I just remember like, you know, after the show, I remember a couple Olympias, they had the pizzas backstage and like, dude, I couldn't even get near the pizzas because the Dexters and Cormiers and all like, dude, it was gone. Melvin Anthony and like Ronnie, they were all like, They swarmed that pizza. Like, and dude, that was the last thing I ever wanted. But, you know, Ronnie was just he was always simple. And, you know, I remember when he came out and like, it was always him and I, and he would come out and, you know, put the oil on and stuff like that. And he was just so confident.
You didn't talk to him much or say
no,
anything
and you
backstage?
know it's so funny because when we got on stage and we turned around to the back, we talked a lot of shit.
Yeah.
So we turn around and he'd be like, okay, time to go to school, whatever, and like he knew the back shots were his, right? And he was screaming, like he would be like, woo, and you could hear it a little bit in the crowd, but standing next to him, it's really loud. But he knew how dominant he was. And I remember just like we would talk and Dexter and, you know, Victor Martinez, we would all kind of talk down the line, especially when we turned around because the judges couldn't see us. So we would kind of converse. And even when Phil came on, I would talk shit to Phil, you know. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. Like we had full conversations with our back to the judges and the audience back there. But it was always funny.
What year was that when they had the challenge round? Didn't you say something like, this is my city?
Well, I mean, they tried to get us to talk shit, but dude, it was just, I was such a square back then. I was only focused on.
You're still a square.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk shit, you know?
Yeah. So the next one, I have read you're the youngest of 7 kids on a farm. How did you find bodybuilding?
It's kind of funny how bodybuilding started for me. My sister's boyfriend brought home a magazine. I started reading it. I don't even know what it was called. It wasn't Muscle and Fitness. It was like Muscle Builder. And I saw, you know, the guys in there. It was like the 82 Olympia, I think. Mm-hmm. And I was just floored by the guys. But, you know, I always mention that Rocky IV movie and the Bloodsport movie always inspired me. And I had a kid. There was a kid named Jeff that used to be a bodybuilder in high school. And he actually took me to the first Gold's Gym. It was in Leominster, Massachusetts when I was like 15. And he was really into like lifting. He had all the body parts and he trained legs. And, you know, back then no one really trained legs. And he took me and, you know, showed me kind of what the gym was like. I didn't work out. I just went that one time to the gym with him. I didn't get a membership or anything. And I knew right then, like, I was always like, wow, these guys are so big. And, you know, I always loved the muscular look. And I remember telling, people at 16, like, I'm going to join the gym at 18 when I graduate high school and I'm going to be a bodybuilder. So I was able to go down to the local Gold's Gym, when I was 16, turning 17.
So you couldn't join a gym underage?
No,
back then?
I could. You could. But I remember going down there and seeing the guys when I signed up for that $300 membership and being like, oh my gosh, these guys are so big. And, these guys looking now probably would be just toned guys, I thought Stallone was huge or Van Damme was huge. Mm-hmm. So I joined the gym and then I just started watching the guys working out. And no one in my family lifted weights. So I had 3 brothers that were lean because they did concrete, and obviously my sisters didn't lift, but I kind of had to find my way. And I mean, I read books. I read this book called Beyond Built from Bob Paris. And that's where I really kind of learned the techniques. And then watching people in the gym. And, I remember seeing those neon signs of Gold's Gym, and they would have these protein shakes. So I'd hang out at the protein shake bar, and they would have these shakes that tasted unbelievable. They probably weren't very healthy for you because protein was kind of garbage back then. So they would mix fruit and stuff in there. And I used to think, hey, this is like the secret to getting big, hanging out at the juice bar after. But, I learned a lot about recovery. And then luckily 6 months after I started training, I found Chris Aceto, and he kind of took me under his wing. But what a journey it was.
Do you think your family looked at you like
they looked at me
different because they were all like professionals?
And I was going to school for criminal justice, and they wanted me to come into concrete business. My dad was a superintendent of highway division, and they just didn't understand it because they didn't understand that whole why would you want to have that much muscle. And I used to show them pictures in the books, and they thought it was kind of silly, right? So next thing you know, I was in it and training under Chris. Chris came to my house, came to the farm, and visited. And I remember the ducks and chickens chasing him around, and I was floored that a guy famous from the magazines came to my house, and then Ed Connors from Gold's came to my parents' house, where my brother still lives now and raises all the pigs and the chickens and the cows and stuff. So, I was able to have great guidance, and that's really what propelled me and gave me the backbone to be able to do what I do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they should have moved the Olympia qualification down to Steve since Iain won Texas? So essentially Iain was already qualified.
No.
I don't think so either.
I think, they stick to it because, I know that the top 2 in Europe was able to qualify, but there's no shows in Europe, and because of COVID, I don't think they'll do that again next year.
When the year started, they knew.
Yeah,
last year it was 3.
Okay, well,
for the big man show.
I mean, how many guys are going to be in the show? That's the question. I mean, I still think the Olympia should be limited to 15.
It's still going to be 15 or so. When I kind of counted through how many people are qualified, now Nathan and Rolly are in there. Depending on if Steve or a Sergio wins the Arnold.
I'm still disappointed that a lot of the guys didn't jump in the earlier contests.
Yeah.
But listen, you don't know the situations with the COVID stuff. And I just know if I was going to, try to qualify, I would try to do a spring show and then a fall show. You know what I mean? If I didn't qualify in the spring, I would jump to the fall and do the fall shows. I wouldn't, because in today's bodybuilding, you need to be on the biggest stage, I feel, in order to, if you're going to focus on bodybuilding, unless you're a social media guy, you need to keep your face relevant, and I think, if, we're limited on time, and it used to be hey, I just want to stand on Olympia stage. And now it doesn't seem as important to people because social media keeps them relevant, whether it's training or just, mentoring people or their diet, dieting people down or whatnot.
Yeah. I've noticed that too. A lot of the guys now just do one show.
Yeah.
They pick a show to qualify. They hope they qualify, and they go to the Olympia, to where years ago, guys would do just show after show after show. The same guys would over and over and over again, And we got one more random question. It's something that's kind of
I'm afraid to hear this.
Somebody referred this over. I guess it was a question on Twitter. If LeBron James trained for 2 years in fighting, could he beat a prime Mike Tyson?
I'm going to blame the producer for this one.
What a garbage question that was.
No, so I'm going to say to you, because we don't argue, but you have your opinion about LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
You're the biggest fan of LeBron.
Not the biggest fan of him, but he's the best. He's the greatest of all time.
Okay. And, people
and I grew up on Jordan.
Okay. Your opinion.
Yes, my opinion.
Listen, he's got long arms, right? He's 6'9".
6'8", 6'9".
Okay. How tall is he, J-Mac? 6'8". He's 6'8". He knows. Because how tall are you, 6'9"? I'm 6'7". Oh, okay, so he's 6'8". You're the tallest film guy, I think. No, you know. So, the reach, but Tyson would knock his head off.
I agree.
I think Tyson would knock. I mean, dude, Tyson would just do that, and he'd come up and.
But let's ask this from. Just think about this. Not like
I'm not a
emotionally.
boxing expert
Neither
though,
am I.
so
Neither am I.
So listen, the experts and listen. You guys can comment on this, but
Yeah,
Tyson was I mean, dude, maybe because I was a kid.
he was the meanest guy ever.
Dude, he had a video game called Mike Tyson's Knockout, and I mean,
Yep. So as soon as you hear that, you instantly want to go no. But then I go back to the question and go, if he was trained by an elite trainer, now no matter what, LeBron is he's probably one of the most super athletes that have ever walked this planet. I remember I was listening to Joe Rogan one day, and they're talking about UFC, and they showed a picture of LeBron James lifting up a tire, and he's 270, and he's almost shredded like a men's physique guy.
yeah.
And he goes, you UFC guys are lucky LeBron James makes so much money in the NBA because he would whoop all of your asses if he was trained. This is Joe Rogan saying this.
Yeah, and listen, with that height and that reach,
If
I
he
mean, you
was
had
trained.
some great. Lennox Lewis was great.
Yeah.
I mean, Anthony Joshua. There's so many great guys,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm not a boxing expert, so I apologize if I'm not. Maybe there's some taller guys that were unbelievable, but listen, yeah, you're right when you think about it. But if my initial thought is like,
No way.
dude, no
Initial
one was
thought.
beating Mike Tyson.
No,
Like
he was killing people.
yeah, so we talk about Mike Tyson prime, like when he was 22, like he became heavyweight champ at 20.
Yeah.
And is he the greatest boxer of all time is the question. I
think
mean,
he
you
was-
sit there and tell me LeBron is, but like if you had to say who was the greatest boxer ever?
I would say he was the most feared
Okay.
because I don't care who it is. If they got on the other side of the ring, they had to have some type of fear
Yeah,
in
and
their
I
heart.
think LeBron has more of a level head. I don't know if Tyson has as much of a level head
Yeah.
as like he was crazy, right?
Yeah. The question, like I said,
I mean, bit some guy's ear off, right? So
initially when I hear that, you think, no way.
yeah.
But then you think about it. If LeBron being a super athlete the way he is, if he was trained by someone who is that good, is how fast he is. Look, he's 270 pounds.
Yeah.
And he's as quick as anyone.
I
out
know,
there.
but listen, we could start talking about other super athletes too, right? And say, okay, what, he is, he's definitely.
Initially, I would say no.
Yeah, I
don't
wonder.
think
I would just wonder what his legacy will be in 20 years from now, LeBron.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where will he be, right?
When you talk about the greatest, it's impossible to compare eras.
But
It just is.
that's why I hate the fact, like someone asked me, I think in another question, like, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Gosh,
I don't know.
You don't know, right?
Who knows?
I mean, that's the amazing thing.
I would
and
say
it's-
this for LeBron, no matter what, he'll be on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
And that alone is a feat. You just can't compare eras. It's too hard. Would Jordan do great here? Of course. But how would LeBron done back then, being as bigger than Karl Malone?
We can always get this basketball talk on here. I think it's kind of.
I think what I think we need to do one day. I think we need to put you in. We need to take you to a gym or a basketball court, and you and J-Mac need to play 1-on-1.
Yeah. He's been trying to drive me to do that once he gets slowed down a little bit. But so listen, that's going to wrap it up for our episode 4.
And one other thing too, the shirt you have on,
Yes.
you need to plug it. Where
Yeah,
can they get it?
jcutlershop.com.
Yep.
I do have something really special though I didn't have for this, but I'll bring it in the next episode for the Cutler Cast.
Well, that sucks. Now people got to. Well, I suppose they got to watch it to the next one.
Yeah. So episode 5 is coming.
Let's see
soon.
how many people watch this to the very end, and how many say go comment and say I want to know what the secret is for next Cutler Cast. And we're out.